They locked me out of my own daughter's wedding. My name, erased from the guest list, by my own family. I watched from my car as strangers walked in, celebrating in the hall I paid for. But that was just the beginning. Let me start. I pulled up to the venue, dressed in the charcoal suit I'd had custom-made half a year back, the one I envisioned wearing proudly as I escorted my daughter down the aisle. The fabric fit my shoulders just right, the tie was pure silk, and my shoes shone like freshly polished obsidian. In my hand, I held a small white card with a gold-trimmed edge. Inside was a handwritten note, a message that had taken me 2 long, emotional nights to write to Emma. It began with words etched into my memory. No matter how tall you grow, you'll always be the little girl who made my mornings worth waking up to. I had read it so many times, I could have recited it even in my sleep. That card wasn't just a piece of paper. It was years of memories pressed into ink, birthday pancake mornings, scraped knees, science fair projects, and countless bedtime stories. The hotel itself looked like a scene from a fairy tale, crystal chandeliers sparkling inside, towering floral arrangements greeting guests, and the faint notes of classical music drifting through the entrance. It should have been a day filled with pride, the kind that makes your heart swell with joy. But as I neared the entrance, something caught my eye. A young woman, likely in her early 20s, dressed in a navy uniform with the hotel's logo above her chest, stood by a velvet rope. Her name tag read, Lila, and her smile was polite but strained, as if it had been worn for far too long. "Good afternoon, sir," she greeted me, subtly positioning herself to block my path. "May I have your name?" she asked. Confidently, I handed it over, fully expecting to be welcomed with a smile and maybe even a glass of champagne. "Mr. Hawthorne," I said, sure she'd find my name without a hitch. She glanced at her tablet, then again, pressing her lips together like a zipper. "I'm sorry, sir," she finally said. "You're not on the guest list." My brain stalled for a moment, and I chuckled softly, waving a hand towards the building. "I'm the father of the bride, Daniel Hawthorne. There's got to be a mistake." Her cheeks flushed a little. "I understand, sir, but I've been instructed to only allow entry to those on the confirmed list. I really am sorry." I didn't panic. I figured it was just an oversight. Maybe an intern missed a line on the spreadsheet. So I stepped aside and called Sophia. She answered on the second ring, but her tone was icy. "Yes," she snapped. "Sophia? I'm outside. They're saying I'm not on the list. Can you let them know to let me in?" There was a pause, long enough for my heart to pound twice in my chest. When she finally spoke, her words were as cold as a steel blade. "That's because you're not. This event is for real family only." I stared at my reflection in the hotel's glass doors, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Real family? Sophia, what are you talking about?" I managed to say. She cut me off, her voice sharp. "We've been through this, Daniel. Emma doesn't need drama today. We're keeping it classy." I could feel the sting in her words, but before I could respond, a different voice took over. "Ethan." He sounded smug, almost bored. "Just go home, Daniel," he said. "We'll send you some leftovers. Or maybe not. Depends on what's left." Then he laughed, and the line went dead. I just stood there, gripping my phone so hard it hurt. My stomach knotted, not out of anger, but from the deep, gut-wrenching disbelief and betrayal that settled like a heavy weight inside me. Lila kept her gaze low, shuffling nervously as if wishing I'd just disappear. I didn't want to cause a scene, definitely not in front of the valet or the guests still arriving. I turned away, crushing the card in my hand, the gold edges folding like they'd been trampled. I headed back to my car, hearing the sounds of celebration behind me, laughter, cheering, music, all echoing from the hall I had paid for. They were celebrating with my money under chandeliers I had financed, and I wasn't even allowed a glimpse inside. When I reached my car, I sank into the leather seat, letting it swallow me. I didn't cry. Couldn't. I just sat there, staring at the entrance. Guests filed in, men in suits, women in elegant gowns, all walking right past the rope without a second thought. No one stopped them. No one questioned them. They belonged there. I didn't. It wasn't anger that came first. It was the crushing silence. That kind of silence that roars in your ears when your whole world shatters. The car's air conditioning hummed, but it couldn't cool the heat rising in my chest. I watched, hoping Emma would come running out, wondering where I was. But the phone never rang. No one called. I stayed there, long enough to see Emma's college friends and distant cousins pass by, people who barely knew her, people who hadn't put in the years or the love. They belonged. I didn't. A photographer's flash went off, capturing another happy couple arriving. I flinched, then let out a bitter laugh. I adjusted my cuffs, trying to shake off the humiliation, but it stuck like oil. My heart kept clinging to the hope that this was all just a mistake, that Emma would come out, furious that I hadn't been let in. But no one came. No one called. I just sat there, hands on the wheel, not moving. Because when you've given your all and still get pushed out, it's not the rage that hits you first. It's that bone-deep, suffocating silence. That story used to make her laugh. Now, I just sat there in my car, feeling like an outsider in my own life. How did we end up here? I used to be her hero, the one who squashed spiders, built towering pillow forts, and waited outside dance recitals with roses in hand. When did I become someone she could just cross off the list? Outside, the world moved on, completely unaware. Limousines idled at the curb, laughter spilled into the streets, and champagne bottles clinked as waiters weaved through the glass doors. My daughter was in there, maybe crying, maybe dancing, but I wouldn't know. I wasn't allowed to witness the moment I had poured so much into. It wasn't just money. It was years of sacrifice. Sophia never saw the promotions I passed up, the overtime I clocked in. She never noticed the mornings I packed Emma's lunch when she was too hungover from her endless wine nights. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was the necklace, a delicate strand of rose gold, holding a tiny sapphire at its center. It had been my grandmother's, then my mother's. I had it polished, the clasp replaced, even had the chain reinforced. It wasn't just a wedding gift, it was a thread back to her roots. A thread back to me. I wasn't even sure if it would matter to her anymore. But I couldn't leave without leaving it. I needed her to know I showed up. I stepped out of the car and walked straight to the lobby, not the ballroom, just the front desk. A young guy behind the counter looked up, startled, probably recognizing me from the dozens of emails about payments and bookings. "Hi, can I help you, sir?" he asked, polite and professional. "Yeah," I replied, steadying my voice. "Could you make sure this gets to Grace Hawthorne? She's the bride. Just tell her it's from her father. No note. She'll know." He glanced at the box, then back at me, nodding. "Of course, sir." "Thank you," I said, forcing a tight smile before turning and walking back outside. I stood by the revolving doors for a moment, watching them spin as guests I'd never met were ushered in. I pictured Grace opening the box, seeing the necklace, recognizing it from the old family photos. Would her breath hitch? Would she smile? Or would she just set it aside like some dusty obligation? Back in the car, I let the engine idle, staring blankly at the dashboard. I wasn't sure where I was going, just that I needed to go. Anywhere but here. I glanced at the clock. 1:13 p.m. The ceremony was starting by now. Someone else would be walking her down the aisle. Probably Ethan. I could picture his smug grin, his perfect hair combed into place, the way he always dressed like a politician, even for brunch. He always wanted my spot, not just with Sophia, but with Grace too. And today, it seemed he got it. I leaned forward, pressing my head against the steering wheel and exhaling, not from sadness, but from something deeper, something older. Years of carrying weight nobody saw, of being reduced, edited out, turned into a shadow that paid bills and stayed silent. My phone buzzed once. Not a call, just a notification. It was a photo posted on Sophia's public story. Emma, standing alone in her gown, hands clasped, looking nervous. No caption. No father. No context. I stared at that image until my eyes burned. Then I deleted it. Because even if I wasn't in that picture, I was in the fabric of her dress. In the ceiling of that venue. In every damn detail that Sophia took credit for. I was the invisible architect of that day. But the thought gnawed at me, did Emma know? Did she choose to let me be erased? Or had she been rewritten by the same woman who had rewritten our marriage? As I finally pulled away from the curb, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But I felt something deep and heavy settle in my chest. It wasn't just exclusion. It was the crushing silence of being erased. And that silence, it was deafening. When I got home, it didn't feel like peace. It felt like abandonment. I dropped my keys on the console table, slipped off my shoes, still holding onto the last shreds of routine. Decorum. Maybe even dignity. I didn't bother with the lights. The sunset filtered through the blinds, casting streaks of gold and orange across the walls, but none of it felt warm. I went straight to the liquor cabinet, pulling out the bottle of Glenfiddich I had been saving for Emma's wedding toast. I had imagined pouring 2 glasses, one for me, one for her. We'd find a quiet corner, away from the crowd, and talk about how far we'd come, how proud I was, how I knew without a doubt that no matter who she married, she would always be my greatest accomplishment. But now, I poured just one glass and drained half of it in one long gulp. I walked into the living room, grabbed the old photo album off the shelf, and sank into the couch like I was dropping into grief. The cover was worn, the corners frayed from years of use, but still holding together, just like I had tried to be. I opened it slowly, half expecting the memories to hurt. And there she was, Emma at 4, with pigtails and a sparkly tutu, smiling after her first dance recital. I remembered that day so clearly. Sophia had forgotten her ballet shoes, so I drove 40 minutes back and forth, speeding through traffic like it was life or death. I missed the opening number, but when Emma spotted me in the crowd, her face lit up like I was the only person in the world. I turned the page. Emma on her first bike, helmet askew, grinning through a gap where her front tooth had fallen out. I taught her to ride that bike right outside this very house. She fell, scraped her knee, cried, almost quit. But I told her, you don't have to be fearless. Just don't stop trying. And she didn't. Another page, her high school graduation. Me, standing there in a wrinkled shirt because I had to run back to the car for her speech when she realized she'd left it in the glove box. I missed half the ceremony but made it back just in time to watch her take the podium. She cried halfway through. People thought it was nerves, but I knew it was because I smiled at her from the second row with the kind of pride only a father could feel. And then there was the college acceptance letter to Stanford. She called me first, before Sophia, even though she was living with her mother by then. Dad, she had said, her voice trembling with excitement. We did it. We. Now, she was married, or maybe still waiting to walk down the aisle, and I wasn't even part of the memory. Not in the ceremony. Not in the photos. Not in the story they were telling. I drained the rest of the whiskey, staring at the album cradled in my lap. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about being left out for the day. It was about being erased from the story entirely. This hadn't just happened overnight. It had been building slowly for years, ever since the divorce, ever since Sophia started rewriting our past, painting me as the distant parent, the one who just paid bills and mailed birthday cards. But that wasn't the truth. I was the one who showed up, even after Sophia packed her things with 2 weeks' notice and moved states away with our daughter. I remember driving 10 hours straight just to see Grace's science fair. I was there for the therapy sessions, the ones Sophia refused to attend. I helped Grace pick her college major. I covered her tuition without a second thought, even if it meant draining my retirement savings early. I stayed. So why did it feel like I had been erased? I stared at my phone. Nothing from Grace. No messages, no missed calls. Just silence. That made it worse because it forced me to face the question I'd been avoiding since I turned around at that hotel lobby. Was she part of it? Did she choose to erase me? That kind of pain doesn't hit like a punch. It's more like paper cuts in your lungs. Small, sharp, impossible to soothe. Maybe Sophia lied to her. Maybe she twisted facts, filtered the truth. She had done it before. She was good at it, too, handing you the knife with a smile, then swearing she never owned it. But even if that were true, didn't Grace wonder where I was? Didn't she scan the crowd for my face? Wonder why the man who taught her to tie her shoes, who stayed up with her the night before the SATs, wasn't there? Or did she just believe whatever lie was easiest to accept? I picked up my phone and opened our old text thread. The last message I sent was 2 days ago. Can't wait to see you walk down the aisle, kiddo. Love you more than anything. Always have. Always will. It was marked as delivered, but not read. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours before I finally typed another message. I was there today. I wasn't allowed in, but I left something for you. You don't have to call. Just wanted you to know I showed up. I pressed send. No punctuation. No guilt trip. Just the truth. And for the first time that day, I let myself cry. Not loud. Not messy. Just quiet tears. The kind that come from the deepest part of you. The part that builds a life around someone and never imagines you'd have to convince them you existed. I had just finished rinsing my glass when the phone lit up. At first, I didn't even look. Probably spam. Maybe some automated reminder for a dentist appointment I no longer cared about. Then it buzzed again. And again. I walked over to the counter, picked it up casually, and that's when I saw it. First, a missed call from Sophia. Then another. And another, stacked like warning signs in a language I didn't understand. I frowned. 23 missed calls. What the hell? A message flashed across the screen. Dad, please pick up. It's urgent. It was from Grace. My stomach dropped. My hands moved faster than my mind could process. I tapped call back, bringing the phone to my ear. 1 ring. 2. She picked up on the 3rd, her voice trembling like she was holding back a flood. Dad, Her voice cracked into a sob. "Grace," I stammered, shocked just to be speaking to her. "What's going on? Are you okay?" Her breathing came out ragged, shaking through the receiver. "Hey." "He called it off," she finally said, her voice breaking. I sat down, the weight of her words pressing me onto the edge of the couch. "Wait, what? Who called what off?" "Brandon," she whispered, like his name alone should make it all clear. "He left. He found out everything." I didn't speak. I wasn't even sure what everything meant. Grace kept going, her voice unraveling with each word. "He saw the guest list, Dad. He saw your name wasn't there." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. I couldn't tell if my heart was racing or stopping altogether. "What do you mean, he saw?" I asked carefully. She sniffled, struggling to catch her breath. "One of his cousins works at the hotel. Lucas, I think. He's in guest services or something. He overheard Mom changing things. He saw her take your name off the final list. It wasn't even subtle. She crossed it out like it was a typo." I got up, pacing the room, my hand clenching the back of my neck. My mind spun with everything I had held back all day. The rejection, the humiliation, the weight of being told I didn't matter. But now, there was an audience. "He left because of that?" I asked, my voice low and even. Grace hesitated before answering. He'd already been uneasy about how controlling Mom was, how everything felt more like a production than a wedding. But this broke him. She paused, and I could almost feel her hesitating, holding back the words. "He left me a note," she finally said. "Didn't say goodbye, just left it with his best man." I heard her breath hitch. It said, her voice grew softer, more fragile. It said, "If you can erase your father for image, what else will you erase?" I didn't breathe for a solid 5 seconds. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of that sentence land like a gavel. That's what Brandon saw, not just my name missing, but the reason behind it. A wedding is supposed to be a promise built on truth, and he saw something so dishonest that he couldn't stay. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't know she did that. I thought you didn't come. I thought you didn't want to be there." My legs gave out, and I sat down on the edge of the coffee table, staring at the phone like it might somehow absorb all the pain I couldn't express. "I was there, Grace," I said, my voice steady but low. "I showed up early. I brought the card. I left the necklace. And when they told me I wasn't welcome, I didn't make a scene. I just walked away." "I'm so sorry, Dad," she sobbed, her voice cracking. "I should have checked. I should have asked. I should have known." "No," I replied, my voice softening. "You should have been able to trust the people closest to you. That's not your fault." She broke down again, and I just listened. Not because I didn't have things to say, but because she needed me to be steady, like I always had been, even in silence. After a long pause, her voice came back, small and hopeful. "Can I see you?" The question hit me like sunlight breaking through prison bars. After all the distance, the erasure, the whispered lies, it was the first real step toward something that resembled healing. "Of course," I said, my voice steady but soft. "Whenever you're ready." "I don't want to stay here tonight," she whispered, her voice cracking at the edges. "I can't stay with her. Not after this." "You don't have to," I replied gently. "Come here." The keys under the mat. "I'm already in the car," she murmured, almost like a confession. "I'm on my way." We ended the call, but I just sat there, the phone still clutched in my hand. The living room was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the echo of her words playing back in my mind. "He called it off. He found out everything." That line looped in my head, steady and unrelenting like a drumbeat. And all I could think was, truth always finds a way out, even when it's wrapped in heartbreak and mascara-streaked cheeks. Even if it arrives too late to save a wedding, it comes. And when it does, the lies fall apart like ash in the wind. By the time Grace pulled into the driveway, the moon hung low and pale, a silent witness to the unraveling of everything we thought was real. I heard the car door shut softly, almost like she didn't want the world to hear her break. I opened the front door before she could even knock. She stood there, framed by the dim light of the street lamps, wearing a wrinkled white dressing robe that still held traces of shimmer on the sleeves. Her hair was loosely pinned, styled hours ago and long forgotten. Her eyes were swollen, makeup smudged to ghostly shadows, and the mascara tracks on her cheeks had dried but refused to disappear. "Hi," she whispered, her voice fragile as if it might shatter. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. She hesitated for just a breath before crossing the threshold, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood. I didn't ask questions. I didn't hug her right away. I just let her move at her own pace. She sank onto the couch like her bones were too heavy to carry. Her eyes drifted around the room, this living room where she had once unwrapped birthday presents, where we watched movies with popcorn bowls balanced between us, where she cried over her first real heartbreak. And now, here she was again. Full circle. A bride with no groom. "I want to tell you everything," she said finally, wiping under her eyes with the back of her hand. "I need to say it all. Just, please don't stop me." "I won't," I replied, settling into the chair across from her, my elbows resting on my knees. She drew a breath, deep and shaky, like she was about to dive headfirst into freezing water. "Lucas works at the hotel," she began. "Brandon's cousin. He was helping with the AV stuff and seating arrangements. Yesterday, he mentioned you hadn't RSVP'd, and I got confused. I told him, of course my dad's coming. He looked at me like I'd just spoken another language. I nodded, waiting, letting her get it out. Today," she continued, 2 hours before the ceremony, Brandon asked if I had checked the final guest list. I hadn't. I didn't think I needed to. Mom said she'd triple-checked everything. I felt my hands tighten into fists, but I kept my expression neutral. "Brandon pulled up the list on Lucas' tablet," she said, her voice cracking. My stomach dropped the second I saw it. It was all there. The edit lock. Your name had been there up until this morning, then removed. She swallowed hard. "Not just removed," she whispered, crossed out in red like it was a mistake. I leaned back, my heart thudding steadily in my chest. Grace rubbed her fingers together nervously, just like she did when she was little. Brandon looked at me and said, "Tell me you didn't know." And I swear to God, Dad, I didn't. I thought you just didn't want to come." My mouth opened slightly, but I held back my words. "Then he started asking questions," she continued. "About who paid for what. About why you weren't walking me down the aisle. About these fake texts Mom showed him last week." My eyebrows shot up. "Fake texts?" She nodded, her eyes flickering with fresh tears. "She used your old number. The one you changed. She showed him messages, pretending to be you. Saying you weren't interested in the wedding. That you didn't think it would last. That you were too busy with your new life." I clenched my jaw so tightly it hurt, but I stayed still, just listening. She even had one that said, "Don't expect me to fund a circus." Brandon said he didn't believe it at first, but she kept at it. "She's good at making you look like the villain, Dad." I looked down at my hands, knuckles white from the strain. "And he believed her," I said, the words barely above a whisper. "Until Lucas," she replied. "Until the guest list." The silence stretched, heavy and unyielding. "He didn't yell," she whispered. "He didn't accuse. He just folded the paper copy of the guest list, handed it to his best man, and left. Just like that." She nodded, her eyes glassy and far away. "He wrote me a note. I didn't even see it until an hour later. I was still waiting in the dressing room, thinking it was just a delay." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "It said, if you can erase your father for image, what else will you erase?" The words lingered in the air, heavy and suffocating, like smoke from a fire that refused to die. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and poured her a glass of water. I came back, handed it to her, and this time I sat beside her close enough to feel the weight of her regret spilling out in waves. "I didn't know how much you'd done," she said, her voice trembling. I thought it was all Mom. I didn't know you paid for the venue, or the dress, or the honeymoon." She told me it was from Ethan. I looked her in the eyes. "I didn't do it for credit," I replied softly. "But you deserved it," she shot back, her voice breaking. "You deserved to be there." I reached out, covering her hand with mine. She flinched, but then squeezed back like she was terrified I might let go. "She didn't just lie to Brandon," she whispered. "She lied to me." I nodded. "She's been doing that a long time," I said quietly. Her eyes met mine, glassy and brimming with guilt. "I believed her," she murmured. "I know," I said, my voice soft and steady. We sat there, the silence stretching out between us, not empty, but full. Full of unspoken apologies, of shattered trust, of the wreckage of what should have been a perfect day. But Brandon had seen it for what it really was, a carefully constructed lie built on the erasure of truth. He didn't want to marry into that. And for the first time, neither did Grace. Sophia always prided herself on perfection, her events, her image, her meticulously curated life. But perfection is fragile. And the moment truth slips through the cracks, the whole thing shatters. Grace stayed beside me, still clutching the glass of water, her fingers trembling slightly. She was still wearing that wedding robe, but now it looked more like a costume, something fragile and pretend. Her breathing was shallow, her hands trembling in her lap as she tried to describe the aftermath. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. She tried to take control of the room after Brandon left. Grace whispered, her voice raw and unsteady. She told everyone that he had food poisoning, that he'd had a panic attack. Anything to keep them calm. Did it work? I asked gently. Her eyes flickered to mine, a faint, almost bitter smile ghosting her lips. Not for long, she said. Word spread fast. How? Lucas told people, she replied, her voice dropping. And then the best man, he read Brandon's note. Right there. In front of everyone. I could almost picture it. The room draped in fairy lights, guests sipping champagne, the soft murmur of conversation, and then a single sentence shattering the illusion. I imagined the collective gasp, the way truth could puncture the air like a pin to a balloon. She tried to grab the mic from him, Grace continued, her voice stronger now. Tried to stop him, but it was too late. He read it anyway. And what did everyone do? I asked, leaning forward. They froze, she said, her gaze drifting to the window like she could still see it unfolding in real time. At first, nobody moved. Then people started whispering. Aunt Margaret got up and walked out first. Then my college friends. Even some of Ethan's people left. I felt something shift in my chest, not joy, not even relief, just a quiet kind of justice. The kind that arrives unannounced, demanding nothing but silence. She couldn't explain it, Grace said, her eyes meeting mine. Someone asked why you weren't there. She stammered. Said you chose not to come, that you didn't believe in the marriage. Her voice sharpened, the edge of it surprising both of us. I stood up, she said, straightening her back. In front of everyone, I said, that's a lie. I told them you paid for everything. That you tried. That you left me a necklace I haven't even opened yet, because I'm scared it'll break me. I blinked, a little stunned by her sudden fire. Then I told them I didn't know, she continued, her eyes brimming with fresh tears. I told them my father showed up and was turned away. Her words hung between us, heavy and raw. I could feel the weight of them settling into the room. There were photographers there, she murmured. Not just the hired ones. Some were press. Social column stuff. When they realized what was happening, they started recording. I saw one of them post a clip of you on TikTok. Standing outside the venue in your suit, holding the card. You didn't even know he was filming. I swallowed, not sure if I should feel violated or vindicated. And the pictures from the wedding? I asked. What happened to those? She looked away for a moment before answering. They didn't come out, she said softly. Why not? The photographer refused to release them, she explained. He said you were listed as the primary sponsor on the contract. It gave you ownership rights. Without your signature, he couldn't distribute anything. I raised my eyebrows. I didn't even know I had that kind of leverage. Neither did Sophia, Grace replied, a thin, bitter smile creeping onto her lips. And it's driving her insane. A small laugh escaped her, more a sigh of disbelief than joy. And the florist, she added, shaking her head. She made a video too. Said she felt sick decorating a space designed to deceive someone. A video? I asked. Yeah, Grace nodded. It already has 500,000 views. I didn't smile, but I did nod, just once. Sophia had spent so many years building a narrative where I was expendable, where appearances meant more than family. And like any lie built too high, it crumbled under its own weight. People are calling her a narcissist, Grace whispered, almost as if she were afraid to say it out loud. Some of them are tagging brands she works with. I didn't stop her. I didn't defend Sophia. I just let the truth settle between us. Heavy, unflinching. She tried to make you disappear, Dad, Grace said quietly. But she made herself unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to scrub me from existence, Sophia had drawn every eye onto her. And when the lights came up, all anyone could see were the cracks. I don't care about the photos, I said finally, my voice steady. Or the viral posts. I care about you. And whether you can rebuild after this. Grace looked up, and for the first time all night, her eyes didn't look like those of a child. They looked like a woman's, scarred but awake. I want to try, she said, the words slipping out like a confession. I want to figure out who I am without her controlling everything. I want to earn my way back to the truth. I nodded, my heart swelling with something I hadn't felt in years. It won't be easy, I told her, my voice softening. I know, she replied, her eyes steady. But at least now I see it. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was cleansing, like air after a storm. She stood up, her robe fluttering around her legs as she moved toward the door. "I left the necklace in the car," she said, pausing at the threshold. "I brought it with me, but I couldn't bring myself to open the box yet." "You don't have to rush," I replied gently. "When you're ready." She nodded, her eyes glimmering with a quiet resolve. "I want to wear it one day. Not today, but when I'm someone who deserves it." She stepped outside into the cool night air, and I followed her to the door. "Thanks for opening the door," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I never closed it," I replied. She smiled, not wide, not polished, but it was real. And after everything, after being erased, shamed, silenced, that was enough. For now. The next evening, I heard the knock before I even turned on the porch light. It wasn't frantic, not rushed, just soft, almost apologetic. When I opened the door, there she stood, arms crossed tightly against her chest, as if holding herself together was the only thing keeping her upright. Her face was bare, remnants of yesterday's makeup smudged beneath her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy knot that told me she hadn't slept. She held a brown paper bag in one hand and the necklace box in the other. "I brought dinner," she said quietly, lifting the bag with a tentative smile. "Thai, your favorite." I stepped aside, the door swinging open a little wider. "Come in," I said. "She never told me you called." Grace continued, her voice strained and distant, like she was revisiting every lie, every hollow excuse. "I found out about the missed birthdays through Facebook. Memories. Not from her." She paused, her fingers tracing the edge of the table absent-mindedly. "And when I asked, she always had an excuse ready. You were busy. You were traveling. You didn't want to cause tension." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. "I was blocked," I said, my voice steady but firm. "By her. By the system. I tried, Grace. I tried so damn hard. But every door I knocked on, she locked right behind me." Her gaze lifted, her eyes glistening with something between regret and disbelief. "I didn't want to believe it," she whispered, her voice cracking. "But after what happened yesterday, I see it now. I see all of it. And I feel so stupid for not seeing it sooner." "You're not stupid," I replied, leaning forward. "You were a child. You trusted the parent you lived with. That's not a flaw." She swallowed hard, eyes fixed on her hands. "She told me you didn't care about the wedding," Grace murmured. "That you hadn't even offered to help." I felt my jaw tighten, memories of every deposit, every invoice flashing through my mind. "I funded it," I said quietly. "Through a joint account. One she controlled. She didn't want anyone to know. I didn't make a big deal of it. I thought maybe this could be something pure. Something about you, not us." Her jaw clenched, a flicker of anger flashing behind her eyes. "She weaponized her silence," Grace said bitterly. "Made it look like apathy." "That's what she's good at," I replied. "She makes absence look intentional." We sat there in silence for a while, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the steady tick of the clock on the wall. Then, slowly, Grace reached out and picked up the necklace box from the coffee table. "I want to see it," she whispered. She opened the lid carefully, her fingers trembling slightly. The necklace rested on a bed of velvet, the sapphire catching the light with a gentle shimmer. Her breath caught. "This was Grandma's," she murmured, her eyes locked on it. "And my mother's before her," I said softly. "It's been passed down on wedding days for 3 generations." Her eyes welled up, and she blinked back the tears. "And you gave it to me, even after I didn't invite you." "I didn't give it for the wedding," I replied gently, my voice firm. "I gave it because you're my daughter. That matters more than anything you wear or anyone you marry." Her fingers brushed over the delicate chain, and she reached out for my hand, holding the necklace in her other palm. "I don't deserve it," she whispered, her voice barely holding. I squeezed her hand, shaking my head. "It's not about deserving," I said, my voice steady. "It's about remembering who you are." Her shoulders shook, and she leaned into me, just like she used to when she was little and the nightmares would come. I wrapped my arm around her, holding her close as she cried, soft, quiet sobs, the kind that don't need answers, just release. I held her, letting the silence say everything she wasn't ready to. "I don't think I can forgive her," she whispered into my chest, her voice fragile and broken. "You don't have to," I replied softly. "Not today. Maybe not ever. You just have to heal." She pulled back slightly, her eyes rimmed red. "Can I stay here tonight?" "Of course," I said, nodding. "Your room is still made up." A faint smile touched her lips. "I thought you might have turned it into a gym," she joked, her voice cracking a little. I chuckled. I don't believe in treadmills, I replied. Life gives us enough running. She laughed, a small, brittle thing, but it was real. As she stood, still clutching the necklace in her hands, I saw something shift in her. Not fixed, not healed, but unburdened. Just enough. She paused at the hallway entrance, turning back to look at me. Thanks, Dad. I nodded, my voice soft. Anytime. As she disappeared down the hall, I leaned back into the couch and stared at the empty takeout containers on the table. The room felt whole again, not because everything was fixed, but because the truth had finally walked through the door and stayed. Days went by, but Sophia never called. Not even a text. No apology. No explanation. Nothing from Ethan either. I didn't expect a grand gesture. Sophia wasn't built for that. But some part of me, the old part that once believed she was better than the woman who manipulated courtrooms and guest lists, had hoped for something. A pause. A moment of acknowledgement. Even a coward's excuse. I thought it was for the best. But all I got was silence. And I was okay with it, because something better filled that space. Grace came back the next evening. In the evening after that. Not for dramatic conversations or tearful reconciliations, but for the little things. A plate of leftovers I had made too much of. A pile of mail she helped me sort through. One afternoon, we even reorganized the garage together. We found her old box of science fair ribbons and the solar system model we built back in 6th grade. It had a few missing planets now, but the glue stains in her handwriting were still there. Still ours. We didn't need to dissect the past in every conversation. Sometimes healing isn't a scream. It's a chair pulled up at the kitchen table. It's laughing at an old photo. It's her asking if I wanted tea without needing to ask why. I always drank it at exactly 8 p.m. And then one afternoon, she brought the necklace back. I was in the backyard, pruning the rose bushes, when she stepped out barefoot, holding the box carefully in both hands. She didn't say anything at first, just watched me with a stillness that made the wind seem louder. I want you to keep it for now, she said finally. I'm not ready to wear it. I wiped my hands on my jeans and met her at the edge of the patio. It's yours, Grace, I said gently. She shook her head. Not until I get it right. Not until I feel like I've earned the weight of it. I understood. The necklace wasn't just jewelry. It was a legacy. A thread connecting women who had known love and sacrifice, hardship and loyalty. And she, in her own way, was still stitching herself back into that story. All right, I said, taking the box from her hands. But it's not a punishment, Grace. It's a promise. For when you're ready. She nodded, and for the first time since everything fell apart, I saw something solid in her eyes again. Not just regret, but resolve. Emma began piecing her life back together bit by bit. She signed up for therapy, started volunteering at the aquarium she loved as a kid. She even reconnected with friends she'd lost touch with during her engagement, people who, it turned out, had quietly warned her about Brandon and Sophia's behavior but were pushed away in the chaos of planning. And me? I learned how to enjoy having her around again without holding my breath, waiting for it to be taken away. We had dinners. We watched documentaries. We planted herbs in the backyard. Small things. But each one felt like a miracle. One night, while watching a rerun of one of her favorite childhood shows, something animated and absurd, she turned to me, her eyes thoughtful. I don't know if I'll ever get married, she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. I looked at her, my heart tightening. You don't have to, I replied gently. But if I do, she continued, her gaze steady, it'll be different. Real. And you'll be the first person I ask for help. Not the last. Those words lingered with me long after the credits rolled. Sophia had tried to cut me out quietly, erase me with a few keystrokes and a stroke of a red pen. She believed image was everything, that if the picture looked perfect, no one would question the missing parts. But the truth has a way of seeping through even the most sealed doors. When it does, it doesn't just shine a light on what happened. It exposes who we really are. Sophia never gave me the apology I deserved, but I got something far more powerful. I got my daughter back. And that was everything. The weather began to turn, the air crisper in the evenings, the sky softening with the first hints of autumn. One evening, Emma and I found ourselves walking down a leaf-covered path in the park, the kind lined with benches and memories. She walked beside me, hands tucked into the pockets of a denim jacket, her eyes scanning the horizon like she was searching for something she couldn't name. We hadn't planned to walk. We'd just finished dinner and didn't want the evening to end. Maybe, subconsciously, she was ready to talk about what really happened, not just the wedding fallout, but the deeper truth she'd kept buried long before invitations were even sent out. I've been thinking, she said finally, her voice tentative, like she was testing the strength of her own words, about how easy it was to let her make decisions for me. I stayed silent, just watching her, waiting. She told me silence was peace, Emma continued, her voice growing firmer. That if I didn't fight her on the small things, everything would go smoother, that I'd be less overwhelmed. She let out a small, humorless laugh, and it worked for a while, letting her pick the flowers, the dress, the menu. But at some point, it wasn't just the wedding. It was your life, I finished for her, my voice soft. She nodded, eyes fixed on the path ahead. Exactly. And I thought, maybe that's what being an adult feels like. Letting someone else make it easier. But it didn't feel easier. It felt like shrinking. I knew that feeling. I had lived it. The years I spent in that marriage, doing mental gymnastics to avoid Sophia's temper, tiptoeing around her moods to keep the peace, only to find that even silence made noise when someone was committed to rewriting you. I don't know who I was becoming, Dad, she said, her voice cracking slightly. But I know who I want to be now. I looked at her, really looked, at the furrow in her brow, the way she stood taller than I'd ever seen her. And I realized something in that moment. Redemption isn't about wiping the slate clean. It's about picking up the pen again, even after you've handed it away. I'm proud of you, I said, my voice steady. Not because you got it all right, but because you're not afraid to own where it went wrong. She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. I thought saying sorry would be enough, but it's not. I need to build something different. Better. Even if it takes time. It will, I agreed. But you're already doing it. We reached the edge of the trail, where a small overlook gave way to the city skyline, lights blinking softly against the horizon. A couple sat on a bench, their hands intertwined, watching the world unfold. I think Brandon saw it before I did, she said suddenly, her voice almost a whisper. What I was letting happen. What I was turning into. Maybe you did, I replied gently. And maybe that's why he walked away. Not to hurt you, but to save you. She blinked slowly, the realization settling into her bones. I used to think him leaving was the worst thing that could have happened, she whispered, staring at the distant lights. But now. She exhaled, her breath misting in the cool air. Now I think it was the start of something I should have faced a long time ago. We turned back towards the car in silence, not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that settles after understanding. It was the silence of two people choosing forward, not because it was easy, but because the past had nothing left to teach them that the present hadn't already exposed. The next morning, Emma showed up with a notebook in hand. She set it down on the kitchen table with purpose, almost reverence. What's this? I asked, taking a sip of coffee. A plan, she replied simply. For my own life. I opened it, flipping through the pages filled with scribbles, career goals, things she wanted to try, even apartment listings. But more than that, there were questions. Big ones. What do I value? What relationships do I nurture? What does family mean if it's built on truth? She watched me read, her fingers nervously drumming the table. I never asked myself these things before, she admitted, because I thought someone else already had the answers. And now, I asked, closing the notebook and meeting her gaze. Now I want to write my own. I nodded, feeling something heavy lift from my chest. That's what redemption is, Emma. Not being perfect, just being willing. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes glimmering with something new, something unbreakable. Sometimes I wish it hadn't taken all of this to get here, she said softly. I reached across the table and tapped the notebook gently. Some foundations only get poured after the storm, I replied, and they're stronger for it. Her smile stretched wider, real and unguarded. In the weeks that followed, Emma didn't just talk about change, she became it. She applied for jobs on her own, cut off toxic friendships, and set boundaries with Sophia. Not in dramatic confrontations or long letters. Just a simple refusal to engage. Her silence wasn't passive, it was powerful. It was a declaration that she would no longer be a puppet. And every Sunday, she came back, not with grand stories or tearful reconciliations, but with quiet presence. Real, honest. And for me, that was more than enough.